Book 71 of 2020 was In Therapy by Susie Orbach. So Orbach presents various vignettes of dialogue therapy between individuals and the therapist. So it kind of says like what they say, what the therapist says, and this kind of illustrates the process of therapy. And within this, Orbach has kind of like selected examples of kind of common themes. I imagine that she experiences quite a lot of examples of the same kind of issues and the same kind of things within people, so she's selected various ones to kind of demonstrate those within this book. So she has one which is an example of people who project their anger onto others to protect themselves from their own shame. There is one about issues with perspectives and how different people have different perspectives, and not to take these kind of personally, because what you see and what they see, often the other person's not thinking of you and it isn't intended in a personal way. They're probably not even thought about you at all. Another one is about infidelity and seeking validation of a father figure. Another one is transference of love onto a therapist. So there's various different examples that are dialogued, and Orbach portrays like various different relationships. So for example, the relationship between a mother and a daughter, between a couple who are quite insecure about being parents to a newborn and how scary that is. There is a situation where there's a revaluation of a relationship, romantic relationship, in the wake of a cancer scare, and at kind of intervals of this kind of dialogue, there is some reflection and deconstruction of like what is being discussed in a therapy session by Orbach, to kind of give you a kind of insight into this kind of therapeutic process and what is actually underlying the problems that these people are discussing. Now, whilst it was interesting to see the various different relationship dynamics and also the kinds of things that people would attend therapy for, because you might assume that people go to therapy for like mental health issues rather than kind of like relationship issues between people, or things that they might be struggling on just in their everyday life that's not necessarily mental illness, and just something that we all kind of probably struggle with. So while that was kind of very interesting for me, I did find it a little bit boring. As I was reading it, I like couldn't wait for it to be over. And there are lots of other books that I've read that are very similar that do a much better job of sustaining kind of like at least my attention. So for example, there's a book called The Examined Life. I can't quite remember who wrote it. I want to say Stephen, but I could be making that up. Like Gorzek or something, Zarzek or some. Anyway, that one is really, really good. I've probably done a review for it somewhere. That was amazing when I read it. I mean, I imagine if I read it again, maybe I wouldn't feel the same about it. So maybe it's the time of life that I'm coming to this book. But yeah, I felt like she could have done a better job at the way it was written. I can't quite remember what my thought process it was at the time. I feel like maybe it was too much dialogue of what was being discussed and not as much kind of delving into the reasons why and the kind of what was, I mean, maybe it was a style of therapy. Can't quite remember exactly what it was like in terms of, I feel like it was more maybe person-centered therapy rather than kind of like cognitive challenging, which maybe I have a bias towards in terms of, I don't know. Maybe I'm just making this up because I can't quite remember. But yeah, so I only gave it 2 stars. So I would probably not bother and go and read The Examined Life because that was better.